on the most tender spots. One thing he'd give this place credit for was the great water pressure. Sure, the tank only held about 5 minutes of hot water, but Andrew hoped that would be enough to soothe the knots in his neck. He'd take a few aspirin afterward and get some rest. Well, maybe he would check out a few of his school books first, see if anything jumped out at him that might help Caleb. Why the other man stayed so fresh in his thoughts, Andrew didn't know. Okay, that wasn't entirely true. He did know, but he didn't want to acknowledge the fact that he found his very old patient attractive. What did that make him? Some sort of freak? The poor guy was 3 shades of gray and in obvious pain, and all Andrew could think about was how handsome he would be when he got well, and how long and lean his body would be pressed to Andrew's. Sick and wrong, man, on so many levels. He stopped to shower as the water began to cool and dried himself off. Caleb probably wasn't even gay. With Andrew's luck, any advance would be rebuffed by one of those gigantic bodyguards. The guys after Danny would probably go easier on him than the Scowley twins. Nothing he could do about the attraction but pretend it didn't exist. Andrew grabbed a book and went to lie in bed. What he could control was how he helped Caleb get better. He adjusted the pillows behind him and read until the words began to blur on the page. The limited information he had made his job more difficult. Fatigue, body pains, and elevated blood pressure were signs for multiple illnesses. Anemia and mononucleosis were on the top of Andrew's list, based on what he'd witnessed. But until he had more details, he wouldn't rule anything out. Day 2 of Andrew's trial period began in much the same way as the first. Jed, a.k.a. Scowley No. 2, opened the door for Andrew when he rang the mysteriously quiet on the outside doorbell and led him to Caleb's sick room. His patient slept restlessly, as pinched and pale as he was the previous day. Andrew checked Caleb's pulse and blood pressure as unobtrusively as he could, still higher than Andrew wanted to see. Adding the notes to his makeshift chart, Andrew frowned. Both numbers were higher than the day before, and they'd been high enough to cause some concern then. Andrew tapped his pen against the notebook. In any other circumstance, he'd request calling in the doctor at this point. That probably wouldn't go over well with Alphonse, though. Caleb groaned and began to curl up on the bed. The muscles in his arm rippled in a way Andrew had never seen before. He ran his hand over Caleb's bicep and jerked it back when the muscle flexed and bulged under his grip. Caleb's eyes opened. They glowed, and not in a weird trick of the light kind of way. His eyes were literally glowing, an amber yellow. Andrew took a hurried step back and swore. Caleb reached out his arm and grabbed Andrew by the wrist. Holy shit! Andrew tried to jerk away, but Caleb's grip tightened, and then claws dug into Andrew's skin. Fucking hell! Andrew tried to unfurl the claws from his skin, but Caleb squeezed harder. The door opened and Alphonse rushed into the room. Caleb growled. Fuck me sideways! Andrew screeched and continued to try to pry his blood-slicked wrist out of Caleb's hand. The dark-pointed nails were embedded in bloody trenches in Andrew's skin. Alphonse grabbed Andrew and held him still. Quiet now, he muttered against Andrew's ear. He reached out and grabbed Caleb's wrist and gave it a quick squeeze. Caleb, release him. Caleb whimpered. His claws tightened in response to the command. Andrew hissed as blood began to flow more quickly down his arm from the wounds. Caleb, don't make me ask again. Alphonse's voice deepened, and Andrew shivered. His tone brooked no disobedience. Caleb released his hold, and Andrew took a few frantic steps back. Alphonse stepped closer to his son and leaned in close. Andrew couldn't make out the mumbled words, but they didn't matter. He was getting the hell out of here. Stat. He made a quick grab for his bag and took off for the bedroom door. Jed and Monty stepped in his path. Andrew tried to dodge around them, but the mountains moved to completely block the way. And then they growled. The same menacing growl that he'd heard the day before. The same that he'd just heard from Caleb. And their eyes glowed as well. Oh, fuck, no! No! No, I'm still asleep. This is a dream, right? That's all this is. Andrew looked down at his still bleeding wrist and acknowledged the pain emanating from the deep scratches. Okay, well, I don't need to pinch myself. Maybe I do. Fuck. Andrew. Alphonse's voice came from directly behind him, and Andrew yelled and spun around to put his back to the wall. Look, sir, I don't know what the hell is going on here, but I'm leaving. You need to get Scowly and Scowlier out of my way. Now. Andrew furrowed his brow and tried to look as menacing as the bodyguards. No one moved. Please? They stared at him with their weird amber eyes and didn't move. Andrew had never felt like prey before, but right now, yeah, he was. No doubt about it. Come back into the room. Caleb owes you an apology. That's okay. Not necessary. I'll just head on home now. No, Andrew, you won't. Come back inside. Alphonse grabbed Andrew's arm and dragged him into the room. For a small man, Alphonse was built like an oak. Andrew had to follow or he'd fall on his face. Caleb was sitting on the bed, his head hanging down. He glanced up at Andrew as Alphonse pulled him toward the bed. I'm sorry, Andrew. I didn't mean to hurt you. Alphonse ran his hand over Caleb's head. You always have been a rascal. Caleb winced at the childish endearment and met Andrew's eyes. I really am sorry. That's okay? Andrew couldn't keep the question from his voice. So many questions rolled through his mind that he couldn't begin to gather his thoughts enough to ask them. Alphonse lifted Andrew's injured arm for Caleb's inspection. Caleb made a strange little growly grumble and ran his unclawed fingers over the bloody marks. Damn, I really did hurt you. He pushed himself up to his feet. Come on, I'll help you clean this up. Alphonse gave Andrew a little push from behind. He glared over his shoulder at the older man, but allowed Caleb to lead him into the bathroom. Caleb turned on the water in the sink, then opened a drawer to remove a washcloth and first aid kit. As Caleb wiped away the blood, Andrew tried to rationalize what had happened. Okay, so there were claws and yellow eyes. It could happen. Andrew whimpered, more from his own thoughts than the sting of the peroxide Caleb poured over his scratches. Caleb gave him a sympathetic look and blew on the bubbling antiseptic. Andrew shivered under the touch. From terror? Yeah. Total terror. That would explain the weak knees, wouldn't it? Caleb added some antibiotic ointment before covering the wounds with a bandage. Caleb, what on earth is going on? Andrew's voice trembled through the question as much as his knees had wobbled through Caleb's soft touch. Alphonse cleared his throat from the doorway, and both men turned to look at him. Come back into the bedroom. I'll explain. Caleb stumbled, and Andrew grabbed him by the wrist. He'd lost what little bit of color he had through the exertions. Damn it, Caleb, you should be in bed. The nurse in him took over. He supported Caleb as they made their way back into the bedroom. Caleb lay back on the bed, but kept hold of Andrew's arm. Without claws this time. Jed, give Andrew a brief demonstration. The bodyguard huffed and stripped off his suit jacket. Andrew stepped back, but Alphonse shot him a reassuring glance. It didn't reassure Andrew at all. Jed continued stripping off his clothes until he stood naked in the doorway. Andrew fought to keep his eyes above the waist. Jed's eyes began to shine with that odd amber glow. His entire body twitched and shuddered, much like Caleb's had earlier. Instead of the fluctuations of muscles leading to nothing, Jed's body began to shift. To the sound of cracks and pops, and not a few snarls, Jed transformed into a huge black and gray dog. No, not a dog. A wolf. Andrew hadn't seen a wolf in person before, but he knew enough to see the difference. In fact, this animal was the same breed as the dogs. No, wolves. He'd seen in the laundry room the previous day. Andrew sat down on the edge of Caleb's bed, his legs unable to support him. He looked at Alphonse, who stood watching his reaction. And now you know our secret. What exactly are you? We're shifters. Some call us werewolves, but I prefer the other definition. And what exactly is that definition? We're sentient beings, Andrew. Werewolves are often seen as slobbering beasts, creatures of the night, if you will. Shifters still have many of their human thoughts and emotions. We can still think in our animal form, although our thoughts are filtered somewhat by our animals. Huh, that's good. So you're all shifters? We are. Good to know. Okay then, I'm going to head on home now. Actually, no, I think I'm going to head to the hospital to have my head examined. I've clearly lost my mind and shouldn't be out in public. Right, that's what I'll do. It's been nice knowing you, and I'm sorry to impart my brand of crazy on you. Caleb chuckled, and Andrew turned to him. You're not crazy, Andrew. Uh-huh. Sure I'm not. I mean, everyone knows that werewolves, shifters, are real. Yep. They aren't just from horror movies. Nope, they're real. And I'm a lunatic. See? Easy enough to explain. Alphonse joined Caleb in his laughter. Andrew, it's okay. We know it's hard to believe. This is why we were hesitant to bring an outsider in for Caleb's care. However, when his condition worsened and nothing we could do would help with his pain, I had to do something to make him more comfortable. We thought we'd be able to keep our secret. Caleb hasn't shown any signs of changing since he became ill. Of course not. Unless you consider the glowing eyes, growling, and weird muscle twitches. Nope, not a single sign. And I kind of think I'm going to pass out now. Caleb sat up quickly and pulled Andrew to him. He wrapped an arm around Andrew's waist and pushed his head down to his knees. Take deep breaths. Sure, Andrew gasped. Deep breaths, right. Breathe in, breathe out. I can do that. Alphonse knelt on the floor by Andrew's legs and laid his hands on Andrew's knees. You'll be fine, Andrew. We aren't going to hurt you. Jed, come over here. The wolf padded over to Alphonse and nuzzled against his arm. Andrew shivered. This is not real. It's very real. Now get a hold of yourself. Oh, sure, no problem. I'll just get right a hold of myself and calm down, because there isn't a wolf standing 6 inches from my very vulnerable neck. Not an issue at all. Caleb lifted Andrew back into a sitting position and used a hand on Andrew's cheek to turn his face. You will not be hurt again. Please believe me. Without the glow, Caleb's eyes weren't scary or intimidating at all. Andrew searched his gaze, could see the sincerity in his plea. I do believe you. I have no idea why, but I do. And damn, but he really did. The likelihood was high that he'd really lost whatever marbles he had left. Alphonse cleared his throat, and Andrew turned to him. You understand that we can't have this spread around? Yeah. Andrew choked back a laugh. Like anyone would believe me. Caleb's hand pressed against Andrew's back, and Andrew looked over his shoulder at his patient. They shared another intense look. Okay, so someone explain to me now why Caleb is sick and what I can do to help. Andrew stared into Caleb's eyes as he asked the question, but he asked it of Alphonse and the guards as well. He needed answers. The mood darkened in the room. Caleb turned his stare to his father, and Andrew followed suit. The older man shrugged, and Andrew could see the pain in his eyes. We're uncertain. A few weeks ago, Caleb lost his ability to shift. Caleb growled low in his chest. I don't know what happened. Nothing changed that I know of. I started feeling sick, weak. When the full moon came, I couldn't shift. Alphonse ran his hand over his short-cropped hair. We have no idea what could have caused this. It's unheard of, really. I've contacted our elders, and even they are at loss. Andrew thought about the books he'd read the night before, the symptoms he'd seen firsthand. Is there any way he could be poisoned? Chapter 3. Alphonse seemed to easily dismiss the idea of poisoning, but Andrew couldn't think of another explanation that fit. Okay, why couldn't it be poison? I'd have known.